Part 1. The Silent Melody. The soft notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major drifted through the quiet corridors of St. Helena Medical Center, weaving between the sterile smell of antiseptic and the distant hum of medical equipment. Violet Chen pressed the keys of her portable keyboard with practiced grace, watching as 7-year-old Tommy Richards slowly moved his fingers along with the melody. The little boy had been recovering from a traumatic brain injury for 3 months, and music therapy was helping rebuild the neural pathways that would allow him to speak again. "Very good, Tommy," Violet whispered, her voice warm with encouragement. "Your fingers remember the pattern. Your brain is healing." Tommy's mother sat in the corner chair, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her son respond to the music in ways that traditional therapy hadn't achieved. These were the moments that made Violet's job feel less like work and more like a calling. She had been at St. Helena for 18 months now, and every day brought new small miracles disguised as medical progress. The afternoon session ended with Tommy humming along to a simple lullaby, the first sounds he had made since the accident. Violet packed her keyboard carefully, said goodbye to the Richards family, and made her way through the hospital's winding corridors toward the elevator. Her workday was officially over, but she rarely left immediately. The hospital's small chapel on the 3rd floor had a beautiful old piano that she was permitted to use after hours, and these evening practice sessions had become her favorite part of each day. As she waited for the elevator, the doors opened to reveal Dr. Gabriel Stone. Stepping out, his surgical scrubs still perfectly pressed despite what had clearly been a long day in the operating room. Violet's breath caught in her throat the way it always did when she encountered him unexpectedly. Gabriel was the head of the neurological department, brilliant and accomplished in ways that made him seem like he existed in a completely different world from her own. "Miss Chen," he said with a polite nod, his deep voice carrying that slight formality he maintained with most hospital staff.
"How was your session with young Tommy today?" The fact that he knew which patient she had been working with surprised
her. Gabriel Stone was busy saving lives and conducting groundbreaking research. She hadn't imagined he paid attention to the music therapy schedules. "He made wonderful progress," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "He hummed today. First vocal sound since his accident." Something flickered in Gabriel's dark eyes, a warmth that seemed to transform his usually composed expression. Music has remarkable healing properties. The brain responds to rhythm and melody in ways we're still discovering. Violet nodded, acutely aware of how close he was standing in the small elevator space. Gabriel was tall, probably 6 feet 2 inches, with dark hair that held just a hint of curl despite his attempts to keep it perfectly styled. His hands were what she noticed most, though, surgeon's hands, precise and gentle, hands that could perform miracles on the most delicate neural tissue. He asked as the elevator climbed toward the 3rd floor. "I usually practice piano in the chapel for a while," she admitted. "The acoustics are lovely, and it helps me unwind after working with patients." The elevator stopped at the 3rd floor, and Violet stepped out, surprised when Gabriel followed her into the hallway. "I hope I'm not keeping you from anything important," she said, suddenly self-conscious about her simple cardigan and the way her long black hair was escaping from its ponytail. "Nothing that can't wait," Gabriel replied. "I often work late, too. The hospital becomes peaceful after visiting hours end." They walked together toward the chapel, their footsteps echoing softly on the polished floors. Violet was trying to think of something intelligent to say when Gabriel spoke again. "I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but I've heard you playing in the evenings. The chapel is near my office, and the music carries through the walls. It's beautiful." Violet felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had assumed her practice sessions were private, a solitary time when she could play whatever moved her, without worrying about whether it fit into a therapeutic framework. "I'm sorry if it's been distracting," she said quickly. "I can find somewhere else to practice if it interferes with your work." Gabriel stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Please don't apologize. Your music is the opposite of distracting. After difficult surgeries, after losing patients, after days when medicine feels more like fighting against impossible odds than healing, hearing you play reminds me why I chose this profession in the first place." The honesty in his voice made Violet's heart skip several beats. She had imagined Dr. Gabriel Stone as untouchable, someone who existed in a realm of medical conferences and research grants and hospital board meetings. The vulnerability in his admission made him suddenly, startlingly human. "What do you usually play?" he asked as they reached the chapel doors. "It depends on my mood," Violet replied. "Classical pieces mostly, some jazz when I'm feeling adventurous. Sometimes I compose small melodies for specific patients." Gabriel's eyes lit with genuine interest. "You compose original music?" "Nothing professional," Violet said quickly. "Just simple themes that seem to help certain patients respond. Tommy likes pieces in major keys with predictable rhythms. Mrs. Patterson in the cardiac wing prefers minor keys with slower tempos. Music affects everyone differently." They had reached the chapel, and Violet hesitated with her hand on the door handle. Inviting Gabriel Stone to listen to her play felt enormously intimate, like opening a door to parts of herself she usually kept carefully guarded. "Would you like to hear something?" She found herself asking before she could lose her nerve. Gabriel's smile transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less formal. "I would be honored." Inside the chapel, late afternoon sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the small wooden pews and the old upright piano near the altar. Violet settled onto the piano bench, acutely aware of Gabriel taking a seat in the front pew where he could see her hands on the keys. She began with Debussy's Clair de Lune. Letting the gentle melody fill the sacred space, she played. She forgot about being nervous, forgot about the impossible distance between her world and Gabriel's, forgot about everything except the music flowing through her fingers. This was where she felt most herself, most alive, most connected to something larger than the daily routines of hospital life. When the final notes faded into silence, Violet looked up to find Gabriel watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That was extraordinary," he said softly. "You have genuine talent, Violet. Has anyone ever told you that you should be performing professionally?" The use of her first name sent a warm flutter through her chest. "Music therapy is where I belong," she replied. "I love seeing how music helps people heal. It feels more meaningful than playing for entertainment." Gabriel stood and walked closer to the piano, his movements careful and deliberate. "What made you choose this work?" Violet's fingers traced silent patterns on the keys as she considered how to answer. "My younger brother was born with severe autism. Traditional communication was almost impossible for him, but he responded to music in incredible ways. Watching him connect with the world through melodies made me realize that music could be medicine." "Where is your brother now?" Gabriel asked gently. "He lives in a specialized care facility in California," Violet replied. "He's doing well. I visit him every few months, and we still communicate better through music than through words." Something in Gabriel's expression suggested he understood the complexity of loving someone whose needs required such specialized care. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a sharp tone reserved for surgical emergencies. Gabriel glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor shifted back into professional mode. "I'm sorry, Violet. Emergency surgery. Car accident victim just came in with severe head trauma." Was already moving toward the door, but he paused at the threshold and turned back. "Thank you for sharing your music with me," he said. "It means more than you know." Then he was gone, leaving Violet alone in the chapel, with the lingering warmth of his words and the echo of her own heartbeat. She sat at the piano for a long time after he left, not playing, just thinking about the way his eyes had softened. When she spoke about her brother, the way he had listened to her music, as if it contained answers to questions he had been carrying, outside the stained glass windows. The sun set over the city, painting the chapel in shades of gold and amber. Violet finally began to play again, choosing a piece she had never played before, letting her fingers find a melody that felt like hope mixed with longing, like the beginning of something she couldn't yet name but desperately wanted to understand. The emergency surgery that had called Gabriel away from the chapel that evening would change everything, though neither he nor Violet could have known it at the time. In the days that followed, Violet found herself looking forward to their brief, encounters in hospital corridors with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. Gabriel had started acknowledging her with more than polite nods, sometimes stopping to ask about her patients or to mention how her evening piano sessions had helped him through particularly difficult cases.
Ow.
It was Dr. Helena Marsh who first noticed the subtle shift in Gabriel's behavior. As chief of medicine, Helena had worked closely with Gabriel for 5 years, and she prided herself on reading people with clinical precision. She observed the way Gabriel's usually focused demeanor softened when he encountered the young music therapist, the way he found excuses to walk past the chapel during evening hours, the way he had started asking seemingly casual questions about Violet's schedule and patient load. What Gabriel didn't know was that Dr. Marsh had been systematically embezzling research funds for the past 3 years, carefully hiding her tracks through a network of falsified reports and redirected grants. The money had funded her gambling addiction and covered the debts that would have destroyed her career and reputation. She had been planning to retire early and disappear before anyone discovered the missing funds. But Gabriel's meticulous nature and his recent promotion to head of the neurological research committee meant he would soon be reviewing financial records that could expose her crimes. Helena had already decided that Gabriel Stone needed to be discredited or removed before he could uncover her embezzlement. The growing connection between Gabriel and Violet presented an unexpected opportunity. If Gabriel were to suffer some kind of accident or medical crisis, the subsequent investigation would focus on medical malpractice or equipment failure rather than financial irregularities. And if the accident happened during an emergency surgery, when emotions and adrenaline were running high, it would be even easier to attribute to human error or mechanical malfunction. The opportunity came 3 weeks after Gabriel and Violet's conversation in the chapel. A multi-car accident on the interstate brought 6 critical patients to St. Helena's emergency department, including a teenage girl with severe traumatic brain injury. Gabriel was called in to perform immediate surgery to relieve pressure on her brain and repair damaged blood vessels. As Gabriel prepared for the operation, Helena volunteered to personally oversee the surgical equipment setup, claiming she wanted to ensure everything was perfect for such a critical case. What she actually did was subtly tamper with the primary electrocautery device, creating a fault that would cause a dangerous electrical surge when the instrument reached a specific temperature setting. Gabriel entered the operating room at 11:30 that night, focused entirely on saving the life of 16-year-old Jessica Morgan. The surgery was complex, requiring extreme precision as Gabriel navigated around swollen brain tissue to repair multiple hemorrhages. He was 3 hours into the procedure, making excellent progress, when he reached for the electrocautery device to seal a particularly delicate blood vessel. The electrical surge that shot through Gabriel's body when he activated the device was powerful enough to stop his heart for nearly 30 seconds. He collapsed beside the operating table, his own brain suffering severe trauma from the electrical shock. The surgical team immediately began resuscitation efforts, while another neurosurgeon was called in to complete Jessica's operation. Violet learned about the accident when her friend Jamie Torres, a fellow music therapist, called her at 6 in the morning. "Violet, you need to get to the hospital," Jamie said, her voice tight with worry. "Dr. Stone was hurt during surgery last night. It's serious." Violet arrived at St. Helena within 20 minutes, still wearing her pajamas under a hastily thrown-on coat. She found Jamie in the intensive care waiting room, along with several members of Gabriel's surgical team and his older brother Oliver Stone, who had driven down from San Francisco as soon as he received the call. "What happened?" Violet asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. "Equipment malfunctioned during an emergency surgery," Oliver explained, his voice hollow with exhaustion, electrical shock. "They got his heart started again, but he's been in a coma for 6 hours now. The doctors aren't sure when he'll wake up or if he'll wake up." The words hit Violet like a physical blow. She sank into one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, trying to process the idea that Gabriel, so alive and present just days ago, was now lying unconscious and unreachable. "Can I see him?" she asked quietly. Oliver looked surprised. "Are you?" "Family, I work here," Violet replied. "I'm a music therapist. Gabriel and I had started becoming friends." Something in her tone must have conveyed the depth of her feelings because Oliver nodded slowly. He's in ICU room 4. They're limiting visitors, but I can ask the nurse to make an exception. That first visit to Gabriel's bedside nearly broke Violet's heart. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the tangle of tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. His face was pale but peaceful, as if he were simply sleeping deeply. Violet sat in the chair beside his bed and tried to make sense of what she was feeling. She had known Gabriel for less than 2 years, had spoken to him personally only a handful of times, yet seeing him like this felt like losing something essential. The possibility that he might never wake up, never smile at her music again, never surprise her with his thoughtful questions or gentle observations, created an ache in her chest that she hadn't expected. "I don't know if you can hear me," she whispered, taking his hand carefully to avoid disturbing the IV line. "But I wanted you to know that your patient, Jessica, is going to be fine. Dr. Martinez finished her surgery, and she's expected to make a full recovery." Gabriel's hand was warm, but completely still. Violet found herself talking to fill the silence, telling him about Tommy's continued progress, about the new patient who had started responding to jazz melodies, about the way the evening light looked different in the chapel without the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. After that first visit, Violet began coming to see Gabriel every day after her regular work hours. She brought her portable keyboard and played soft classical pieces, hoping that music might reach him in ways that words couldn't. The ICU nurses were initially hesitant about the music, but when they saw that Gabriel's vital signs became more stable during Violet's visits, they began encouraging her to stay longer. Music therapy isn't uncommon for coma patients. Dr. Rodriguez, the attending physician, told Oliver during one of his visits. The brain often continues to process auditory information even when the patient appears unconscious. If Dr. Stone responds positively to her presence, we should consider it part of his treatment plan. Violet established a routine. She would arrive at the hospital by 7 each evening, after completing her regular patient sessions. She would sit beside Gabriel's bed, talking to him about her day, about hospital news, about anything that might keep him connected to the world he was missing. Then she would play music, choosing pieces she remembered him enjoying when he listened from his office near the chapel. As the days turned into weeks, Violet found herself sharing things with Gabriel that she had never spoken aloud to anyone. She told him about her childhood in a musical family, about the pressure she had felt to become a concert pianist, and the relief she had discovered when she chose music therapy instead. She told him about her brother Daniel and the way music had bridged the gap between his world and theirs. She told him about her dreams of opening a music therapy program for children with autism, about her fear that she wasn't talented enough or brave enough to make a real difference in people's lives. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm hiding behind helping others," she admitted during one evening visit 3 weeks after the accident. "Maybe I chose music therapy because it felt safer than trying to succeed as a performer. Maybe I'm a coward." She played Chopin that night, the same nocturne she had been playing when Gabriel first heard her in the chapel. As her fingers moved across the keyboard, she found herself speaking more honestly than she had ever spoken to anyone. "I need you to know something," she said softly, not looking at Gabriel's still face. "I think I was falling in love with you before this happened. I know that sounds ridiculous. We barely knew each other, and you exist in this whole different world of medical brilliance and important research, and probably brilliant colleagues who understand your work in ways I never could." The heart monitor beside Gabriel's bed continued its steady beeping, unchanged by her confession. "But when I watched you with patients, when you talked about music being medicine, when you sat in that chapel and listened to me play like it was the most important thing in the world, I felt like maybe we understood each other in some fundamental way. I felt like maybe the differences between our worlds didn't matter as much as I thought they did." Violet stopped playing and looked at Gabriel's peaceful face, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the dark lashes against his pale cheeks, the strong hands that had performed countless surgical miracles now lying motionless on the white hospital. "Blanket, I love you," she said simply. "I know you can't hear me, and I know this probably changes nothing, but I needed to say it out loud at least once. I love your mind and your gentleness and the way you make me feel like my music matters. I love how seriously you take your work and how you remember details about my patients. I love that you saw something in me that I was afraid to see in myself." What Violet didn't know was that Gabriel could hear every word. Electrical trauma had damaged the parts of his brain that controlled conscious movement and response, but his auditory processing remained intact. He was trapped in his own body, aware but unable to speak or move or open his eyes. Violet's voice had become his lifeline, her music the only thing that made the endless darkness bearable. Her confessions of love were not falling on deaf ears, but into a heart that was fully conscious and completely transformed by what she was revealing. Gabriel's return to consciousness came gradually, like surfacing from the deepest part of an ocean. First came the awareness of light pressing against his eyelids, and the recognition of familiar sounds, the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator, the soft beeping of monitors, and most importantly, the gentle melody of Bach's Goldberg variations. Being played on a portable keyboard nearby, Violet was playing with her eyes closed, lost in the music, as she had been every evening for 6 weeks. She had just finished telling Gabriel about Tommy's continued progress and about her brother, Daniel's latest letter from California, when she began the batch piece that had become Gabriel's favorite during their evening sessions. She didn't notice when his fingers began to move slightly against the hospital blanket, or when his breathing pattern changed from the artificial rhythm of the ventilator to something more natural and self-directed. It was only when she finished the piece and opened her eyes that she saw Gabriel watching her, his dark eyes alert and focused in a way that made her heart stop completely. "Please don't stop playing," he said, his voice hoarse from weeks of intubation, but unmistakably his own. "Your music brought me back." Violet's hands flew to her mouth, the keyboard sliding forgotten to the floor as she stared at Gabriel's face. He was really awake, really looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. Something intense and grateful and completely overwhelming. "You're awake," she whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell. "Oh, Gabriel, you're really awake." "I heard everything," Gabriel said, trying to sit up despite the tubes and wires still connecting him to various machines. "Every word, every song, every story about your brother and your fears and your dreams. Violet, I heard you tell me you loved me." The blush that spread across Violet's cheeks was visible even in the dim lighting of the ICU room. Oh, she had assumed. Her confessions were private, safe in the darkness of what she thought was his unconsciousness. "I shouldn't have said those things," she began, but Gabriel interrupted her with a slight shake of his head. "You saved my life," he said simply. "Your voice, your music, your presence, every single evening. It was the only thing that kept me tethered to consciousness. There were moments when letting go would have been easier than fighting to come back, but I couldn't bear the thought of never hearing you play again, never being able to tell you how I felt about you before the accident." Violet's eyes widened. "How you felt about me?" Gabriel managed a weak but genuine smile. "I was falling in love with you too, Violet. I had been for months before we ever spoke in the chapel. I used to time my late work sessions so I could hear you practice piano. I looked forward to our brief encounters in the hallways like they were the best part of my day. I was actually planning to ask you to dinner the night I got called into emergency surgery." The joy that flooded through Violet was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Gabriel loved her back. He had loved her before the accident, and somehow, impossibly, her presence during his coma had deepened that connection instead of making it awkward or complicated. "I can't believe you heard everything," she said, reaching for his hand with careful reverence. "Every word," Gabriel confirmed, squeezing her fingers gently. "Including the part where you said you were afraid we came from different worlds. Violet, I need you to understand something. My world means nothing without you in it. These past 6 weeks, listening to you share your thoughts and your music and your beautiful heart, I realized that everything I thought was important about my life was just window dressing. You are what matters." Before Violet could respond, the ICU door opened, and Dr. Rodriguez entered with Oliver Stone close behind. The surprise on both their faces when they saw Gabriel awake and alert was worth capturing in photographs. "Gabriel," Oliver exclaimed, rushing to his brother's bedside. "Thank God, we were so worried. How do you feel?" Can you remember what happened? As the medical team ran through their neurological assessments and Gabriel answered questions about his memory and cognitive function, Violet quietly gathered her keyboard and prepared to leave. This was family time, medical time. It's not the intimate space she had occupied during Gabriel's unconsciousness, but Gabriel noticed her retreat immediately. "Violet, please don't go," he said, his eyes finding hers across the suddenly crowded room. "I need you to stay." Oliver looked between his brother and Violet with obvious curiosity. While Dr. Rodriguez made notes about Gabriel's remarkable recovery and his clear cognitive function, "We'll need to run more extensive tests," Dr. Rodriguez explained, "but your initial responses are incredibly encouraging. Whatever therapy Miss Chen has been providing, it seems to have been remarkably effective." It was Oliver who first suspected that something more than medical recovery was happening between Gabriel and Violet. After the medical team left and visiting hours officially ended, he lingered in Gabriel's room, observing the way his brother's attention remained focused on the young woman with the keyboard. "There's something I need to tell you both," Oliver said carefully. "Something about Gabriel's accident." Both Gabriel and Violet turned their attention to Oliver, who looked uncomfortable with what he was about to reveal. "I've been investigating the equipment malfunction that caused your injury," Oliver explained to Gabriel. "What I found suggests it wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately tampered with the electrocautery device." The blood drained from Gabriel's face. "Deliberately? Who would want to hurt me?" Oliver glanced at Violet, clearly uncertain about discussing this in front of someone who wasn't family. Gabriel noticed his hesitation immediately. "Violet can hear whatever you need to tell me," Gabriel said firmly. "She's been more present for me during this crisis than anyone else. I trust her completely." "It was Dr. Helena Marsh," Oliver said quietly. "I hired a private investigator. When the official inquiry seemed to be moving too slowly, we discovered she's been embezzling research funds for years. She knew you were about to uncover her crimes during your financial review of the Neurological Research Committee. She tampered with the surgical equipment to discredit you, or worse, before you could expose her." Violet felt cold fear wash through her. If Dr. Marsh had been willing to hurt Gabriel to protect her secret, what would she do now that he was recovering and could potentially remember details about his research that would incriminate her? "Has she been arrested?" Gabriel asked. "Not yet," Oliver admitted. "We need more concrete evidence to build a case that will hold up in court. And Gabriel, there's something else. If Dr. Marsh realizes you're awake and recovering your memory, she might try to finish what she started. Anyone close to you could be at risk." Gabriel's eyes immediately went to Violet, and she saw the same fear she was feeling reflected in his expression. "I won't let anything happen to you," Gabriel said to Violet with fierce determination. "Whatever we need to do to keep you safe, we'll do it." Oliver cleared his throat delicately. "Actually, there might be a legal solution that would offer Violet comprehensive protection. Our family's legal and security resources are extensive, but they're only available to immediate family members. If you and Violet were married, she would have access to all the same protections that Gabriel has." The suggestion hung in the air between them like a challenge and an opportunity all at once. Gabriel looked at Violet with an expression that was part hope, part apology for the circumstances forcing such a momentous decision. "I know this isn't how anyone imagines a proposal," Gabriel said softly. "But Violet, I meant what I said about my world being meaningless without you. I love you, and I want to spend my life with you regardless of Dr. Marsh or legal protection or any external circumstance. If you'll have me, I promise to spend every day proving that we don't come from different worlds at all. Come from the same world, the one where music and healing and love matter more than anything else." Violet looked at Gabriel's earnest. Faye thought about the weeks she had spent by his bedside, the conversations they had shared, the way her music had literally helped bring him back to consciousness. This wasn't the traditional romance she might have imagined, but it was real and deep and built on a foundation of genuine care and understanding. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it. To marriage and protection and building a life together. But mostly yes because I love you too. And because these past 6 weeks taught me that life is too short and too precious to waste time being afraid of taking chances." Gabriel's smile was radiant enough to power the entire ICU. Then let's get married as soon as I'm discharged from this hospital. I want to start our life together immediately. Oliver grinned and pulled out his phone. I'll call our family attorney and get the paperwork started. I'll make sure our security team is aware of the situation with Dr. Marsh. 6 weeks later, Gabriel and Violet were married in the small chapel where their love story had begun. Gabriel had made a complete recovery from his injuries, while Dr. Marsh had been arrested and charged with embezzlement and attempted murder. The wedding was attended by Gabriel's patients, Violet's music therapy clients, and the hospital staff who had watched their relationship develop through crisis and healing. Tommy Richards now speaking in full sentences thanks to continued music. Therapy served as ring-bearer with the serious concentration of a child given an important job. Jessica Morgan, the teenage patient whose surgery had led to Gabriel's accident, played violin during the ceremony, her recovery so complete that she had returned to her school's orchestra program. Violet wore a simple white dress and carried a bouquet of white roses mixed with sheet music from the batch piece that had been playing when Gabriel first opened his eyes. Gabriel's boutonniere was made from the same sheet music, a symbol of how their love had been written in melodies long before it was spoken in words. I take you to be my partner in all things, Gabriel said during their personally written vows, his voice steady and clear. In music and medicine, in laughter and tears, in the quiet moments when your piano fills our home, and in the challenging moments when we face whatever life brings together, I promise to listen to your heart the way I listened to your music during the darkest time of my life, with complete attention and endless gratitude. Violet's vows were accompanied by soft tears that reflected joy rather than sadness. I take you to be my harmony, she said, looking directly into Gabriel's eyes. You taught me that love doesn't require us to come from the same world, only to be willing to create a new world together. I promise to play the soundtrack of our life too, fill our days with music and our challenges with hope, and to never stop believing in the healing power of love. When they kissed to seal their marriage, the entire chapel erupted in applause. But Violet only heard the sound of Gabriel's heartbeat against her cheek, and the whispered words meant only for her ears. Thank you for bringing me back to life. The reception was held in the hospital's main conference room, transformed with flowers and fairy lights into something magical. Oliver Stone gave a speech about second chances and the mysterious ways that love finds people when they least expect. Jamie Torres played guitar and sang while several of Violet's former patients joined in with instruments they had learned during their recovery processes. But the moment that would be remembered most clearly came when Gabriel surprised Violet by sitting down at the old upright piano from the chapel, which had been carefully moved to the reception room for the occasion. His fingers found the keys with the same precision he used in surgery. Playing the opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece Violet had been playing the first time he heard her music. This is where it all began, Gabriel said to the gathered guests, his hands never stopping their movement across the keys, with music that spoke to places in my heart I didn't know existed. Violet taught me that healing comes in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply knowing that someone cares enough to stay, to keep playing beautiful music in the darkness until you find your way back to the light. Violet joined him at the piano bench, their hands finding a duet arrangement they had practiced during Gabriel's recovery. As they played together, their wedding guests slowly began to dance, creating a celebration that perfectly captured the intersection of medicine and music, of professional dedication and personal love, of two people who had found each other in the most unexpected circumstances and built something extraordinary from that discovery. The evening ended with Gabriel and Violet alone in the chapel, Violet playing softly while Gabriel listened from the same pew where he had first heard her perform. The stained glass windows cast colored light across their faces, and the familiar space held all the memories of their courtship, the first conversation, the weeks of one-sided confessions, the moment Gabriel opened his eyes to find her there waiting for him. What happens now? Violet asked, her hands still moving gently. Across the piano keys, Gabriel stood and moved to sit beside her on the piano bench, his arm around her waist as she continued to play. Now we go home together, he said simply. We wake up tomorrow as husband and wife, and we start building the life we talked about. During all those evenings, when you thought I couldn't hear you, we expand the music therapy program. We travel to see your brother Daniel. We adopt the dog you mentioned wanting, and we fill our house with music and laughter and whatever else makes us happy, and we solve medical mysteries together. Violet asked with a smile, thinking of how their different perspectives had already begun to influence each other's work. Definitely, Gabriel agreed. I think you'll find that healing and harmony have more in common than most people realize. As they left the chapel hand in hand, walking toward their new life together, the last notes of Violet's piano playing lingered in the sacred space. The music had brought them together, sustained them through crisis, and would continue to be the soundtrack of their love story for all the years to come. In the months that followed, their marriage became a model for how two different professional worlds could complement and strengthen each other. Gabriel's surgical precision, combined with Violet's intuitive understanding of emotional healing, created innovative treatment approaches that helped patients recover not just physically, but holistically. Their home became a gathering place for colleagues and patients alike, filled with music and medical discussions and the kind of warmth that made everyone feel welcome. But the most beautiful part of their story was the simplest. Every evening, when their work was finished and their house was quiet, Violet would play piano while Gabriel listened, recreating the peaceful intimacy that had sustained them through their darkest moments and would continue to sustain them through all the bright tomorrows yet to come.